Hello, welcome to another episode of Meaghan Chitwood Live, powered by BNI. In this episode, Emily and I are going to be talking about the huge opportunity people have when things don't go perfectly and there might be conflict. There is a huge opportunity that most people don't take advantage of. So let's get started. And you can catch us each Monday on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can also catch the replays on Instagram as well. So welcome back again, Emily, my partner in crime when it comes to all things BNI.
Good morning.
So this seems to be a season of a little bit of conflict. And so there's a huge opportunity that people have to take advantage of. Because I do think it's kind of a season of that a little bit. So let's talk about what happened. Why do you think people don't why do you think people avoid it so much?
Oh, well, I mean, for one, you feel like you look bad. I think a lot of what we do just in society in general is to make sure we don't look bad, right? And we always want to make sure that everything looks good on the surface. That's what social media is up to and all these things. And then underneath is really what's really going on, right? And so we want to always portray that we're professional, that we're on top of it, that, where things are getting done and that you're being, providing great customer service. That's what we say every week about why work with us. And if things don't align with that, it looks bad. And so I think traditionally people just hide it, walk away from it, try to sweep it under the rug, and try to fix it on the back end, which typically leads to more conflict, a bigger issue down the road. Like if you would have just came at me in the very beginning when it first had an issue and we talked about it directly, we could have collaborated, solved it together, allotted for some space, some grace, and it wouldn't become an issue or wouldn't have become as big of an issue.
So a couple things that you just said that I think are really important to reinforce is making everything look good is a short-term proposition, because what will happen is it will escalate. If you catch it fast, you can usually get it fixed fast. If you avoid it, it starts to really escalate and get much worse. So in the long run, it's going to be way worse than in the short run, just calling up and saying, hey, I messed up, or hey, I don't think I can help you, or whatever it is, as quickly. And statistics show that people who do that and have that level of transparency ultimately end up having a better customer experience as a result.
Absolutely. I mean, think back to the last time that somebody called you and fell on their sword, right? Or said, hey, listen, I really messed up here. Like, my initial reaction is always respect and appreciation. Absolutely. Before I'm even frustrated or upset about whatever the issue may be, right? Like you're like, well, thanks for being honest is always my reaction. And what can we do to fix it is the next response, right? So that's the opportunity that you're missing out on when you opened the show, which is you're missing out on an opportunity to earn a crap ton of respect from people, which is, I think, the thing that's most important to a lot of us.
It is. I had to make a hard phone call this week, and it was, and I knew the other person on the other end of the line was the upset one, and I mean, it was dread, right? That I had to. I mean, there was that whole buildup, and at the same time, you can spend so much time dreading it, and it just doesn't get any better. My lesson learned for myself was just do it fast, do it as fast as you can, and just get it over with. Just absolutely get it over with, even if you can't. Because I think there's also I'm finding that there are a lot of people today also that just are impossible to please. And that was my experience. The person on the other end of the phone was just going to be impossible to please. I was never going to get all the way there to giving her exactly what she wanted. And so it turned, Yeah. So also, I mean, it is scary, and sometimes you're not going to win them all. At least I didn't win mine this week.
Right. And in some cases you don't. I think that now let's be really clear. So what I'm about to say is like, you got to call or, confront it authentically. Right. And saying I messed up, but whenever I hear that, I think about in one of Brene Brown's books, she talks about oversharing authentically, right? Like it doesn't have to be so extreme where you're like, oh my gosh, everything's so out of control and I don't know what I'm doing here and blah, blah, blah. Like that's too much, which then the receiver of that is like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And now it's a dramatic situation. Whereas her instructions are, and a lot of people's are, here's the situation, but don't worry, I have it under control and I'm going to lead us through. Here's my solution. Does that work for you? You don't just call and say, well, I don't know what we're going to do about this. Can't just present problems. You got to present solutions too. Or at least inquire with them, what do you think is the right path forward? Or what do you want to see come out of this? And then you can say, can I do that or not do that? Whatever their request is. Right.
And I'll use my example as the first thing I did was call. I wasn't involved in the actual situation. So I ended up, getting all the details about all of it and trying to see what is the ultimate path forward that we're going to take here to make sure that everyone is happy in the end. And, so I got all that information together. So in my head, I had a solution of, you tell me everything that you heard and what happened and all those things. And then here, I already know in the background to balance, because that's the other one, right? Is there's what happened, what actually happened, what are these two people saying, all of that. And, and then I also had my own boundaries of where I was willing to go and where I wasn't willing to go. And little cheat sheet, I think, yeah, it is. It's right here. And I wrote down the key things that I needed to make sure I actually said, so that if I got nervous, then I immediately knew I could go back to that. And it saved me so much because I was able to kind of keep my composure about all of it. And I'm going to say this too. The situation I'm talking about is not a BNI situation. It's not a BNI situation. So it's also a new one to me. So for those who are kind of new in your business and you haven't had to deal with this a lot, I just was absolutely in your shoes this week. And working through it, and working through something that I wasn't super duper like in BNI I've been doing for 18 years. I'm like completely comfortable in that realm, but this one I wasn't. It was just a little bit outside of that. And it does,
depending on, right, if it's a referral partner, a customer, an employee, like the way you handle it's always going to be a little bit different. And something that you just said kind of triggered me to think about when you're talking about both sides. You said both sides, and I'm like, oh, right. Like, let's talk a little bit about third party conflict resolution, right? When you, like, as the employer, or sometimes in our BNI chapters, you're the membership committee or the president, and you have to handle conflict resolution of two parties, and you're the leader of the organization. How do you handle that? And I think both sides understanding that there are two sides to every story all of the time. And we have to, before people are coming to you with their complaints that you need to resolve, we've got to get to the bottom of that, and that everybody has their own perspective of what's really going on. And it's your job to be the non-biased. Okay, let's see, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Right?
Absolutely. And getting all of those details together to pull together what each of those sides are. Yeah, that's 100% absolutely right. And also, you didn't mention, it also applies to when you've passed a referral and you want to say hello to her?
Need help finding my shoes.
Your shoes are right over there, baby.
I like my running fast.
I think your running shoes are there too. Sorry, guys.
Oh, like I said, so normalized. So when you're the referral, when you're the person who gave the referral, again, it is balancing those both sides, right? You are not the person who it directly happened to, and you've got to just sort. And what I was also doing is trying to piece together, like, what is the truth? I'm seeing it from these two people's perspective. Now, what is actually, what is actually the truth, and what is right, and what is, and what is required based on my industry and all of those kinds of things to sort all of that out.
Right. Even as the referral connector, right? The person who connected these two, what's your role in resolving that conflict, right? Because, and I've said this a lot of times this week specifically, when you give a referral to somebody, for like a connection or type of referral, like a third party referral, you're not just giving a piece of business to somebody, you're giving a piece of your reputation and your credibility. So who are you? What's your role in this? Let's say you hook these two people up and they have a negative experience. Do you have a role in helping resolve that conflict, or don't you? How do you go about that by and keeping both of those relationships intact? And so what are you supposed to do? You do hear both sides of the story. You do try to figure out, but ultimately, I would personally participate in that conflict resolution, at least at a minimal level, because I feel a piece of at least a minor part of that, because if it weren't for me, they wouldn't have been together.
Yeah. And passing a referral makes this person who you've passed the referral to endeared to you, but also to the person who you're helping solve the problem. They're also endeared to you. So you're in it. Like, you are in it. Like, whether you want to be in it or not, you're in it. So you usually can be the person who can help everyone see each other's perspectives and actually bring resolution. And I would say it's risky to not jump in and help be a part of the solution, because then both of them can look at you and say, you sent me a terrible customer. You sent me a terrible, you referred me to somebody terrible and blah, blah, blah. So it could be that. So I do think you have to take a responsibility in all of that, for sure.
I agree. Otherwise, you end up with a negative experience for all three parties involved, and that's not good.
It's terrible. So what would be the top tips that you would say are most important when you're handling something that just doesn't go perfectly?
So I think back to a very dear friend of mine and mentor, when I always call her with conflict resolution questions, and her answer is always the same. And I have finally internalized it, so I don't have to call her anymore, but it's Gina Harold. And she says, begin with the end in mind.
Yep.
It's always where you start, is with the end. What's the end in your brain resolution? For me, and you start with that, say, hey, listen, something's going on, and I'm wanting to do everything I can to resolve it so that you're happy and I'm happy. Or, you got to set the stage from the get-go that this is where I want to take us. So let's back up and start, right? So that's the number one tip, is always set the precedent. Don't worry, everything's fine or can be fine, but I got to inform you of this, right? So we're not starting off with, I got something bad to tell you.
Yes.
So we begin with the end in mind. The other tip I would say is acknowledging that the person's been heard. I think is a step that we just kind of skip over. I am very thoughtful about, when I speak with people in conflict, to say, I hear you, I understand you, I understand where you're coming from, or I even actually ask, do you feel heard? Do you feel like you have expressed everything that you need to? And that typically de-escalates the whole thing about 75%. So.
Absolutely. And I do repeat back, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. This is what I'm hearing you say. Right. And so if you can nail that, then they know that you've really heard them.
And that's, like I said, it's typical. That is generally all anybody ever wants is that, especially in like a customer to a service provider, that is typically all they want, is just that somebody over there at your company cares about the fact that I'm upset.
Absolutely.
What's really going on and how we fix it isn't really the issue. It's just, I'm upset and I need somebody to care that I'm upset. Yeah. And so you identifying that to them de-escalates the whole thing pretty quickly.
And a great resource to talk about this is a book I love called Crucial Conversations. It helps walk you through difficult conversations in all elements and gives you tips and tricks on how to do that as well. It's a great read if you want to get comfortable with it. Like I said, in the world that we're in right now, there is just a lot of conflict going on around us. And I think the more that we can get comfortable with how to handle it, and we can it's like sales, right? You go out and you sell. No doesn't become devastating by the 100th one. Similarly, I think if you start working on handling conflict, it won't be a thing when you've exercised that muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just like you said, getting yourself worked up, it does come easier and easier. But because I think we're human and we care about how people are and how they feel, you always still take a deep breath before you make the call to go, I really hope this goes well, because I just don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want, like we all care about each other. And I think that if you always come from that space, we'll be okay.
Absolutely. Awesome. I hope everybody got some good tips off of this, because it is, like I said, a very important thing at this time. And we will see you again next week.
Thanks.